Welcome back to the Dershow. Some interesting developments between last Wednesday and now. On Thursday night, I met with Donald Trump for a while. We were both in Washington, D.C., speaking at the same event. He was speaking on Thursday night. I was speaking on Friday, but I met with him. And of course, he tried to persuade me to endorse him. And he said to my wife, look, I don't want Alan or you to do anything you feel uncomfortable doing, but how important it is if you were to endorse me. So we talked about that. We talked about some other things. And then I went and heard him speak, and his speech was very good and very strongly supportive of Israel and foreign policy. I disagreed with two things he said, and I made it clear and let him know in emails afterward. He emailed me after the speech, and I mailed him back through his staff guy. I didn't like that he said that if he is defeated, Israel will disappear within 2 years. I don't think Israel's survival depends on the election of any particular person, whether it be Benjamin Netanyahu or Donald Trump. I think Israel will survive. I also didn't like the fact that he said if he loses, it might be the fault of the Jews. No, the Jews live in California, New York, and Florida. Those three states are all out of play. New York, California will clearly go Democrat, and Florida will clearly go Republican. So I don't think the Jewish vote will determine Pennsylvania. It could have an impact, but maybe it will. And if it does, it obviously would be Kamala Harris's fault for deliberately not nominating Josh Shapiro. But I suspect that it will turn on other states, and I suspect Israel will survive. Though I think that Trump would be better for Israel, and he was a good president for Israel. So, in any event, I had a good talk with him, and he seemed in good spirits. And he, made an hour-long speech, and it was very, very well accepted by the assembled crowd of several thousand people. Speaking of Israel, Israel has now attacked missile launching sites in Hezbollah, as it should, and I knew it would. These missiles are hidden in people's homes. Israel has produced evidence, videotaped evidence of holes in homes from which rockets are sent, and they've warned all the people, get out of your homes if there are rockets there, because we're coming after you. Israel has no obligation, indeed has no right, to allow Hezbollah to fire rockets at its civilians. But of course, all the, quote, scholars and international lawyers have said that what Israel's doing is in violation of the law of war. It shouldn't have blown up. Hezbollah fighters who are using their communications devices. Nonsense. These folks know better. Most of them understand a little bit about international law. Some of them don't. Some of them are ignoramuses. Some of them are just biased. I can't imagine a military operation more lawful than going after combatants using the communication device given to them by the terrorist organization, Hezbollah. It's as if they went after only people with a big sign, H. These are all people who are members of Hezbollah. Of course, there's going to be some, and a really tiny, tiny number of collateral deaths and injuries. But the law of proportionality says that you're entitled to go after combatants as long as the ratio of civilian deaths to combatant deaths is reasonable. Now, the usual ratio is 4 civilians to every combatant death. In Gaza, it was much lower for Israel, less than 2 for every, by Hamas's count. By Hamas's count, there were 17,000 combatants killed and 41,000 people totally killed. That would be approximately a 2-to-1 ratio. The figures, of course, are very different, and the ratio is a lot closer to 1.3 or 1.4 to 1. But in this attack, it's 0 to 1. I mean, almost no civilians were killed. Far, far fewer civilians were killed compared to terrorists. So the international law people and the diplomats and the scholars and the UN, all of whom say this was in violation of the law of war, are just full of it. They're just full of it. And some of them know it, and they're just being bigoted. And some of them are too ignorant to understand I have a column coming out in tomorrow's Herald, tomorrow's The Hill, which lays it all out and very clearly under international law. Okay, and we're going to see, I guess the people in Lebanon are calling it the Gazadization of Lebanon. Yeah. It sends a message. You send your people to kill Israelis, as on October 7th, you're going to see your country destroyed with as few civilians as possible and as many terrorists as possible. That happened on October 7th. On October 8th, without any provocation, Hezbollah sent thousands of rockets into Israel, and they continue to send these rockets, resulting in less than 100,000, more than 50,000, probably in the area of 60 or 70,000 Israeli civilians who have had to leave their homes. No country has to tolerate that. Would America tolerate if you had to abandon Manhattan or Brooklyn to rockets? Of course not. So Israel has attacked and will attack and should attack until it's safe for its civilians to go home. Very easy to stop the attack. Just stop sending rockets into Israel. It's all in the hands of Hezbollah. The same thing is true with Hamas. If Hamas just surrenders Sinwar, and the only tragedy is Sinwar didn't have one of these communications devices, and if his had blown off, if he had, I suspect the war would now be over. So let's look at the situation realistically. All right, let's turn to the subject at hand. Now, every newspaper in the country and every media is reporting that Routh, the man who undoubtedly, we have to say presumptively, but undoubtedly plotted to try to kill President Trump, apparently according to evidence that now seems indisputable. He hung around the golf course for long periods of time, days, maybe as much as a month before, surveilling everything, planning everything. And then on the day, he was there for 12 hours. The most likely thing is he wasn't sure that Trump would be coming. He just went there every day. And the amazing thing is the Secret Service didn't spot him. You think if he comes every day and he's carrying, a rifle and a scope, of course he's putting it in a bag or something, but still, you'd think the Secret Service would have caught on to him, but they didn't. In any event, the charges are now being changed, and it was just, possession of guns and all of that. Now that they found the letters, and presumably and hopefully they were found with a warrant and with probable cause, and there won't be any exclusionary rule keeping the evidence out. We'll see, because we don't know who his lawyer is at this point. But his lawyer will obviously look at those issues and see if there's any basis for excluding the letter or excluding statements he may have made. But let's assume for a moment the evidence is all admissible. Now you're going to hear a shocking statement from a law professor who's been teaching about attempts and writing about attempts for 65 years. 65 years. I am probably the world's leading expert on the crime of attempt. I wrote my first essay on the crime of attempt when I was a first-year law student. It's what got me to become the editor-in-chief of the Yale Law Journal. It was entitled, "Why Do Criminal Attempts Fail?" It was regarded as a classic in its day. You can still get it, probably online. Why do criminal attempts fail? And it was the first analysis of criminal attempts from a psychological point of view. But in doing the research, I became a real expert on the law of attempts. I know the law of attempts cold. I've taught it every year for the 50 years I taught criminal law at Harvard Law School. And let me tell you, based on my experience, I don't think they have a case for attempted assassination. Let me explain why. This is going to sound so counterintuitive. The guy obviously wanted to kill the president, and he took actions to kill the president. Now, here I'm going to tell you something that's a little surprising. This is like a criminal law class. So you were getting a free Harvard criminal law class. If he conspired with somebody else to do it, it would be an open and shut case. Because for a conspiracy, all you need is an agreement to kill the president or to try to kill the president. And he did certainly agree with himself. He certainly made up his mind. We have the evidence, the letter. He wrote a letter. We have other evidence saying, I wanted to kill the president. I tried to kill the president. I failed. I'm giving $150,000 to anybody else who succeeds. So if it were conspiracy, it would be a clear case. Conspiracy to assassinate the president. Open and shut. Why isn't it open and shut case for attempt? Because attempt involves only one person, not a conspiracy. And that one person has to have crossed certain lines to turn it into an attempt. So the criminal law distinguishes between preparation and attempt. Now, there's no question he prepared to kill the president. He did everything he could to do it. He got the gun, he got the ammunition, he got the scope, he surveilled the circumstance, he sat in the bushes. And of course, again, to make this clear, the first guy who tried to kill the president and who was killed, there was clearly an attempt. He fired the gun. He aimed at the president, fired at him, and hit him in the ear. The clearest possible case of attempted murder. It's the Sherlock Holmes case, where Sherlock Holmes knows that Moriarty is trying to kill him, so he gets Madame Tussaud to do a wax sculpture of Sherlock Holmes sitting in his rocking chair, rocking back and forth, and Moriarty shoots the sculpture and blows its head off. The only question there was, can you attempt to kill a statue? But there was enough. He crossed the line. He shot them. But this guy never aimed at the president. He was going to. Had the president gotten to the sixth hole, he would have aimed at him. Maybe you can argue he aimed at the sixth hole. Maybe conceivably that might be enough because he put the gun through the link fence and aimed at a place where he expected the president would be. Is that enough? Not clear. Just not clear whether that's enough. And then, of course, he was shot at and he ran away. So he never had the president in his line of fire. And of course, he never pulled the trigger. So the question that the court will have to address, and it's a question without a clear answer, is whether or not putting your gun in a location, putting it through the link fence, but not getting the president in the line of sight and not pulling the trigger is enough to turn it from preparation to attempt. And the law is just unclear on that. So the case I wrote about back in 59 or 1960, before most of you were born, when I was a first-year student at Yale Law School, was the following. A guy was having a fight with his wife, and he had a gun. And he chased his wife. And finally, he caught up with her, put the gun to her head, and pulled the trigger. That seems like enough, right? But the gun was unloaded. There was no bullet in the chamber. And the question was, did he forget to load the gun? Or did he forget that the gun was unloaded? Did he unconsciously not want to kill her? Did he know the gun was unloaded? He yelled at her when it wouldn't fire. He said the following words, ITWONT Now, I purposely spell it out because the case turned on whether he said, it won't fire, which would mean he knew it was empty, or did he say, it won't fire? Oh my God, it won't fire. So everything turned on what was in his mind, what was his intention. And I wrote my first law review article on that issue, and I speculated because I was a freshman. This was very sophomoric, but I was a freshman. And as a freshman, you're allowed to be sophomoric. That's actually a plus. So I speculated that maybe unconsciously, he really didn't want to kill her, so he failed to load the gun, or he forgot that he didn't load the gun. I went through all those speculations, but in doing so, I did all the research on attempted murder. Flash forward 20 years, I had the following case. This is a real law school class. I had the following case. A guy named Alan Dershowitz was in a drug uh, conspiracy with two other guys. And they were having a fight about certain money that was paid. And a guy named Bush turned to a guy named, I forget now, and said, the other drug dealer, and said, unless you give me the couple of $100 you owe me, I'm going to shoot you. And he pulls out his gun. And the guy, Geller, his name was Geller. This case is a long time ago. Geller says to Bush, you're not going to shoot me. We're friends. We're just arguing over a couple of $100. What do you think Bush does? Shoots him right in the heart. Guy keels over on the floor. Bush then turns to my client, Delugash, and says, you're the only one who saw me do it. In New York, you can't testify. You can't take the testimony without corroboration of an accomplice, so I need you to shoot him too. Now, my client was probably threatened because the other guy had a gun, but so did Delugash. And so Delugash pulls out the gun and, under the instructions from Bush, shoots the man in the head. Now, the question was he alive or dead when Delugash shot him? They convict him. I wasn't the trial lawyer. They convict him of murder. I'm asked to do the appeal. Guy didn't have any money. I did it. I did the appeal. And I won. And the court rendered a very important decision that it couldn't be murder because man dies but once. Famous line. Law students all over the country study this case. Man dies but once. And he was dead when he was shot through the heart. But the question is, did Delugash know he was dead? And so the case was appealed to the New York Court of Appeals, the highest court. And the argument was that although he couldn't be convicted of murder, man dies but once, he could be convicted of attempted murder. And so the issue was, can you attempt to kill a corpse? I had to argue that case. Ultimately, we won that case as well, and he went free. And so that was a great victory, and it's in all the case books in the country that students learn from. So the law of attempts is very, very complicated and very, very difficult. And if I were teaching criminal law again, I had an exam to give, I would give the Routh case as an exam question. I would give all the facts, surveils, goes there, puts the gun through doesn't aim at the president, would aim at the president. Is that enough for attempted murder? And if I had 150 students, like I used to have at Harvard Law School, I would say the class was split down the middle. Half of them would say yes, half of them would say no. They would all agree that if you were writing a new law, that should be enough. Should be enough. But is it enough? And that's the question. And there's no clear answer to that question. So we'll have to wait and see. There are plenty of other charges they can get him on, and enough to put him in jail probably for the rest of his life. But the law of attempts, by the way, is no different for a president than it is for anybody else. The law of attempts is the same for all people. As the Bible says, don't recognize faces. And so the law is the same for, Mr. Delugash and Sherlock Holmes, or there was another famous case where a guy wanted to kill his enemy. He climbed up to the guy's bedroom. The guy was in bed. He took out a gun. He shot him 6 times in the head. One problem. The autopsy revealed that the guy had died of a heart attack 4 hours earlier. He was dead at the time my client shot him, but my client didn't know. So was that enough for attempted murder? Again, it's the kind of thing that law students love to split hairs about, but this is a real case. And I have to tell you, as the world's leading expert on attempted murder, I don't know the answer to that question. And if I don't know the answer to that question, I can tell you the courts will have a problem answering that question. My prediction, the courts will find a way to conclude that there was enough there to say he crossed the line from preparation to attempt. But if they say that, they will be making basically new law. There are a lot of cases like this. I had another case where my client was standing over the man who had killed his sister, and he had a knife in his hand, and he said, unless you confess that you killed my sister, I will kill you. And as soon as he said that, the police came in, grabbed the knife, and he didn't kill him. He was convicted of attempt. I won that case. And so, the question, look, it goes back to the Bible. Did Abraham really intend to kill Isaac when he put him, on the burning place and tied him? The Akedah, the binding. He put his hand up to slay him, the Bible says, and the angel came forward and stopped him. Was that attempted murder? We've been debating that since the Bible. So why do we think we should have answers to these questions? These are hard questions. And I love teaching criminal law for 50 years because I love these hard questions. And the students would always say, what's the answer? I would say, the important thing is not the answer, it's the question. It's the question. That's what I teach, the questions. I want to teach you how to think about these things. You come up with your own answers. Reasonable people can say one thing, reasonable people can say the other thing. Answers are boring. It's the questions that are so interesting. So let's turn to some questions now from my audience. Okay, this is a good one. I said that the fact that they had transmission devices, the fact that they had beepers, shows that they were Hezbollah people. And therefore, what Israel did was valid. So here's the question. What's the difference between if they weren't terrorists, they wouldn't be in Gitmo, and being blown up as proof that they are Hezbollah? I have learned so much from you over the years, but I tune you out whenever you go warmongering on behalf of Israel, which is sadly usually your opener these days. Well, change the channel. But that's what I care about, along with many, many other things. And if you don't understand the difference between if they weren't in Gitmo, if they weren't terrorists, they wouldn't be in Gitmo. Who knows? That's just, they were arrested. Maybe they are terrorists. Maybe they aren't terrorists. Here, they were given by Hezbollah a device which only Hezbollah fighters got. They don't give them out on the street. Can you imagine Hezbollah just giving anybody want a device here? Anybody want to listen to our biggest secrets? Anybody want to know when our next rocket is going into Israel? Anyone want to know anything you want to know about our attempt to, kill civilians in Israel? Here, take a transmission device, take a beeper. No, beepers were reserved. So it wasn't me saying they're Hezbollah. It was Hezbollah saying they're Hezbollah. If you don't understand the difference between that and the Gitmo argument, tune me out and go to a new channel. The difference is obvious, and any rational person should understand it. I don't agree with you about early voting. Like millions of Americans, I travel a lot for my job. I am almost always out of state on Tuesdays. Early voting allows me to vote on a Saturday when I'm home. Otherwise, I would have to use an absentee ballot, which is not secure. Several answers. Number one, I don't like early voting, but doesn't mean I don't agree that if a person is away on business, he shouldn't be able to vote early. There should be. The vote is on Tuesday. Anybody who's going to be away on Tuesday should be allowed to vote on Saturday or Sunday. That's fine. I have no objection to that. What I object is starting to vote in September. We have votes going in now. It's September, October, November. No, I don't like that. And I don't like it being routine. If you have a good reason, that's fine. And as far as absentee ballots not being secure, well, I think they're pretty secure if they're done in the right way, if they're counted in the right way, and if you have all kind of criteria for how it's done. But by the way, most early votes are by absentee ballot. In fact, I think all of them are. I don't even think there's a situation, maybe there is, but I don't know about it, where you can vote early by going to the polling place. My understanding is that early voting certainly is largely absentee voting, so I'm not sure I understand the logic of your argument. But in any event, I still don't like early voting. It's like, as I've said, arguing to the jury, and the jury votes halfway through the argument before hearing the defense evidence in the case. No, I don't like it. And I'm not going to vote. I still haven't made up my mind. My talk with Donald Trump, obviously pushes me in one direction, and then I hear things that push me in another direction. So I'm waiting until all the evidence is in. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, don't vote until you hear all the evidence. That's what I'm doing. Mr. Dershowitz, recently the IDF shut down the West Bank newsroom of Al Jazeera. Isn't this a violation of the human rights of free speech? Yes, it is. I'm opposed to it. I think Israel is wrong. It shouldn't have closed down Al Jazeera. It can impose rules. It's an occupation. And Israel claims that Al Jazeera is not really a newspaper. It's a propaganda and inciting. Maybe that's true, but the marketplace of ideas should determine that. So I'm opposed to Israel shutting down Al Jazeera. I've been interviewed by Al Jazeera, and they really cheated. I mean, they really cheated. I said I would agree to be interviewed by Al Jazeera on the condition that you do not edit the interview, that the minute you say hello till the minute you say goodbye, every word I say is what appears on the screen. They agreed, and they complied with that. What they didn't tell me is that as I was speaking, it was a taped interview, as I was speaking, they had a rebuttal to everything I said on the side, and it was an obviously unfair rebuttal. They were just contradicting everything I said. It was a little bit like the way some of the newspapers handled the debate with Donald Trump, being more critical of one side than the other. But in this case, Al Jazeera cheated. And so I don't have any great fondness for Al Jazeera, but I don't think they should have been closed down. This is an interesting quote from Martin Luther King. In the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. And boy, is that true. Is that true? And when I think of the people who abstained from the vote denying Israel the right to defend itself, those are supposed to be our friends. Canada, Great Britain, they're not friends. I'm Canadian, and my government disgusts me. It disgusts me too. Look, Canada has a horrible, horrible history when it comes to Jews. It kept out every single Jew during the Holocaust. One Jew is one too many, said the minister of absorption. As soon as the war was over, it let in Nazis after Nazis after Nazis. So Canada's history with the Jews is not to be commended. And what the Trudeau government has done now in turning against Israel is despicable. I knew Pierre Trudeau, his father. I worked with him. I worked with him on human rights. I don't think his father would have done what he's done. He's just pandering for votes. Okay. The Iranian ambassador to Lebanon lost an eye. An eye got blown out when he was talking on or looking at his beeper. Karma, he says, as Iran puts out the eye of women and other protesters in Iran when they fall into the hands of the regime. But even more so, what is the Iranian ambassador who has immunity doing being a member of Hezbollah? We now know he was a member of Hezbollah and an active person in Hezbollah because he was given one of the communication devices. Again, you don't get that just for being an ambassador. You get that for being a Hezbollah guy. I am shocked. Canada only abstained and didn't vote yes on the resolution. Little Fidel Castro knows with the election coming up, he has to rein in his communist sympathies, perhaps. The UK is no surprise. Labour runs the government. I'd love to see Trump not only have the U.S. leave the UN, but kick the UN out of the U.S. You know, I'm getting closer and closer to that view. I live right near the UN. I'm going to be speaking at the UN on Wednesday, and I'm going to be speaking in front of the UN tomorrow against Iran when the president of Iran speaks to the General Assembly. I'm American Irish. Shame on Ireland. All the Irish I know here in the United States back Israel. Same with me. I have many, many Irish friends. My daughter-in-law is Irish. My grandchildren are half Irish. And everybody I know who's Irish supports Israel. There may be some that don't, but my God, Ireland is really, really, really turned against Israel, much the way it turned against England during the Second World War. This will end with a quip, okay? I would expect that if I asked Kamala about her opinion regarding an arms embargo on Israel, she would respond by telling me about her childhood. That's exactly the way she responded to the first question. In the debate, do you think people are better off today than they were? You know, well, let me tell you, I am the child of middle class. No, you're not. You're the child of a professor at a major university. That's a little better than kind of working class or middle class. But okay, so tomorrow we'll have more news. You know, you never know what's going to happen between today And tomorrow we live in interesting times. And so stay tuned and you'll hear my take on current events.